Hi everyone, welcome to a new video sa ating DEVPSY series. For today, we're gonna talk about early childhood. So mag-start tayo with the cognitive developments in early childhood. Okay, so speaking of cognitive, it is best that we start this discussion by talking about Piaget's preoperational stage. In infancy, nandito tayo sa tinatawag na sensory motor stage. Okay? In sensory motor, remember from infancy, we learn about the environment, okay, through our senses. So wala pa tayong prior understanding of how the environment works in the previous stage. We're still gathering information. We're still gathering data about our environment. Okay, but now that the child is in the pre-operational stage, the second stage in this list, no, the child can now mentally represent objects. They can now mentally do what they could only do before physically. Okay, and this is when verbal thinking develops, at nandito rin yung egocentric thinking. So pag-uusapan natin yan mamaya. Okay, now unlike in sensory motor, in which the child needs to experience something, sense something in order for him or her to learn how the environment works, now in the pre-operational stage, meron na siyang more advanced understanding of how the world works. For example, alam niya na kapag binitawan niya yung toys, mahuhulog. Pag binitawan niya yung bola, mahuhulog. Kasi na may mentally represent na niya yung mangyayari, which is something na hindi pa niya na-acquire back in the previous stage. Okay? Aside from that, okay, yun nga lang, the child is not yet capable of what we call conservation, as you can see dun sa last line for pre-operational. The child is not yet capable of conservation, and that is the mental manipulation of objects. So hindi pa siya capable of conservation of shape, number, liquid, and so on, na later i-discuss natin. Okay? So kung merong cognitive advances in the pre-operational stage, ang mga bata meron ding mga cognitive immaturities. Okay? Na makikita natin sa mga 2 to 7 years old na mga bata. By the way, the ages may not be consistent across textbooks. Okay? For me, what's important is maintindihan meaning or kung ano yung mga nangyayari in these stages. Okay? Anyway, so let's begin first by talking about the keys. Okay? So, unang-una, okay, like what I've been saying earlier, okay, the child, meron tayong tinatawag na centration or the inability to decenter. This means that for a child, no, kapag ina-appreciate niya yung isang situation or object, madalas tinitingnan niya yung isang aspect lang. The child ignores the other aspects, the other variables, the other characteristics of a situation or an object. Okay? Nagpo-focus lang siya sa isang characteristic. Say for example, in this example, nagpaparamihan sila ng juice, no, dun sa baso na binigay sa kanila. Now, yung magkapatid, ina-assume nung isa na mas marami siyang juice dahil mas malaking lalagyan niya. Okay? Pero hindi niya na-acknowledge na even though mas malaki yon, baka naman mas malapad yung isa. Okay? Which means same lang sila ng amount ng juice. So nag-focus lang siya dun sa size. Or particularly pwedeng dun lang dun sa haba, no sa taas pala, I mean, nung lalagyan. Pero hindi niya tiningnan kung gaano kalapad. Hindi niya tiningnan na parehong galing yan sa same Tetra Pak or container ng juice. Kaya meron siyang ganong incorrect assumption. Okay? So, ayan. Common yan sa mga toys. Nagko-compare sila. O, mas malaki yung sa akin. Mas malaki yung baril-barilan ko. Mas marami akong toys kesa sa iyo. Pero they neglect the other aspects like the price, the value, at iba pang aspects that make that at iba pang aspects, no, that differentiates objects from one another. Okay? Second, cognitive immaturity is irreversibility related dun sa juice example. Alam naman natin na kahit magkaiba yung size ng lalagyan, if they came from the same size na Tetra Pak, same lang yung amount niyan. Okay? However, since the child is not yet capable of mentally reversing processes, hindi niya nare-realize na kapag ibalik mo sa Tetra Pak yung juice na nandun sa baso, same lang yan. Walang pinagkaiba yan. Okay? The child is not yet mature enough, okay, to understand or to mentally reverse processes. Okay, that's the second one. The third one, related pa rin sa first two examples natin, they focus on states rather than transformations. Okay, here's our example. In the conservation task, Jacob does not understand that transforming the shape of a liquid does not change the amount. For example, ililipat natin yung juice from tasa sa mas mataas na baso. Okay? Now, the child will think that since you transfer it from maliit na tasa to baso, dahil mas manipis yun, no? Parang mas, yung cylinder, no? Mas manipis siya, di ba? Akala ngayon ng bata, dumami na siya in terms of quantity dahil tumaas yung lalagyan. Okay, but in fact, hindi ganon. They only focus on what it looks like sa present, but they do not acknowledge yung transformation na nangyari. Okay, they only focus on states. The fourth one is transductive reasoning. Okay? Yes, at this point meron na silang basic understanding of cause and effects ng causality, pero just like other kids, no? Just like mga bata, di ba? Meron silang mga shortcomings pa in understanding cause and effect in the environment. Okay, for example, kapag umulan, akala nila it's because they're sad. O kaya kapag nagkasakit yung kapatid nila, akala nila it's because nag-away sila. Okay? Meron pa silang incorrect understanding of causality. For example, kaya dumadaan yung train kasi tumatahol yung aso. But in fact, tumatahol lang naman yung aso kasi siguro nakita niya yung train, so na-excite siya. It's not because na tumahol siya kaya biglang lumitaw yung train. It's not because of that. No, that's transductive reasoning. The next one is egocentrism. It's not that children are selfish. It's just that it's hard for them to put themselves into another person's situation. Okay? Into another person's shoes. For example, di ba, gusto nila kung ano yung panunuorin sa TV, yung favorite show nila. Okay? Ayaw nila kapag ibang channel yung pinapanood nila sa TV. Okay? So, paano tinest ni Piaget yung egocentrism? In the mountain task, okay? For example, ito yung bata, and then there's a stuffed toy or a doll, no, dito sa kabila, no, sa harap ng bata. Basically, yung tanong ni Piaget is to describe the mountains from the perspective of the doll, of the stuffed toy. Okay? However, so dapat iba na yung pananaw mo kasi kabilang side siya ng table, no, putting yourself in the situation of the doll. Okay? However, Piaget found out, okay, that nahihirapan yung mga bata sa task na ito. They can only describe the mountains from their perspective and not from the perspective of the doll. Okay? However, yung criticism for this is that the task, according to critics, is so difficult for children. It requires abstract thinking, which is something that you only develop pagdating ng adolescence. Okay? In another experiment, the experimenter, okay, meron siyang dalawang rubber ducky. Okay? Yung isa, nilagay ng experimenter somewhere na yung bata lang makakakita at hindi niya makikita. Tapos yung isang rubber duck, nilagay niya sa place kung saan makikita nila pareho. Kunyari, sa table. When the experimenter asked the child, okay, to get the rubber ducky, there's a tendency for kids to get the rubber duck na nakikita ng experimenter, not the one na yung bata lang yung nakakakita. So that might suggest that kids may not be as egocentric as Piaget believed, or maybe mas maaga siyang na-overcome ng mga bata. Okay? Kasi nga may loophole yung mountain task ni Piaget. Okay? The next one is animism. Children tend to believe that objects that non-living things are may buhay dahil gumagalaw sila like toys, electric fan, okay, clouds, and so on. Ayan, no? They believe that objects are alive. They attribute life to objects. Like the car is hungry and wants some gas to eat. And finally, okay, they have the inability to distinguish appearance from reality. For example, yung bata nagsuot ng shades na blue tinted. Ngayon, akala niya that the entire world is now blue. Okay, but in reality, it's only because of the shades. Ayan. Okay? So, ayan. Before we move on, ito yung example ng inability to conserve among kids. Yan, for example, nilipat yung lalagyan, yung tubig from the beaker to the petri dish. Okay? Pag tanongin natin sila, ano yung mas marami, they answer na yung baso. But in fact, same lang yan ang amount. Magkaiba lang yung shape ng lalagyan. Magkaiba lang yung size. Pangalawa, in terms of mass, anong mas mabigat, no? Ito ba? Or itong nasa right? Kids usually answer na ito daw. But in reality, same lang naman yan because at the start, same sila ng amount. Di ba? In terms of coins, anong mas marami? Itong nasa taas or nasa baba? Okay, we're not talking about values. We're talking about quantity. No? Tig-apat sila as you can see. Porket pinagdikit-dikit yung coins, akala nila mas konti than this one na malalaki. No? Tapos kapag pinaghiwa-hiwalay mo, akala nila same, doon lang nila nare-realize na same sila in quantity. Yan. Okay? Akala nila kasi kumonte just because it occupies na mas konting space. Next, in terms of length, kung baluktot yung line, akala nila mas maiksi. Okay? Sa lapis, no, anong mas mahaba dito? Porket naka-move forward yung yellow, akala nila mas mahaba yun than the green. Okay? So that's for their inability to conserve. No? Nagfe-fail usually yung mga bata in the pre-operational stage. Okay? Now, if we have talked about immaturities, this time, let's talk about cognitive advances. In what way, okay, sila nag-develop cognitively? Number one, the use of symbols. This means that capable na sila of mentally representing something even without it being present at the moment. For example, they know what an elephant looks like kahit na walang elephant at present. Another example of symbolic thinking is they have the ability to pretend that an object represents another object. Okay, like for example, the slice of an apple is a vacuum cleaner. Okay, yung towel, for example, yun yung kapa nila. Yung pillow, for example, yun yung gagawin nilang pillow fort, for example. Yan, di ba? They have the ability to imagine that objects represent something else. No? Like, kunyari notebook, pero laptop daw yun, or computer. Yan. Okay? What else? They understand identities. Ayan. For example, some kids, in the later stage, in the later part of their pre-operational, as they mature, they know that yung teacher nila, kahit naka-costume siya, yun pa rin yung teacher nila. That's something that they learn as they mature. Next, cause and effect. If may nakita silang bola na nagro-roll sa sahig, okay, hindi yan gagalaw kung walang tumulak niyan. So they now realize that events have causes, mas na-develop pa. The next is classification. Although it's not yet perfect, they can now classify, okay, pero marami pa siyang mga loopholes. Like, siguro alam nila yung mga classifications, but nahihirapan sila with what we call mga subcategories, which is something we master sa next stage pa. Okay, alam lang nila yung mga categories, but if you're talking about subcategories, like types of animals, then marami pa yung klase in terms of cats, dogs, marami pa yung mga breed, di ba? Doon sila mahihirapan. Okay? The next is understanding number. Okay? So, in this stage, they now have the ability to count and deal with quantities. Yan. But they rely on manual counting. Kunya, tanongin mo, ilan yung candy mo dyan? Bibilangin talaga nila isa-isa. Okay? That's something na, pero tayo, mga adult, ini-estimate lang natin. Pero sila, bibilangin nila isa-isa. No? Empathy. Okay? They now display pro-social behavior or helping behavior. Okay, okay. Eventually, they learn how to put themselves in another person's situation. Kumbaga, unti-unti nilang na-overcome yung egocentrism, which is also related to theory of mind. Kapag meron na silang theory of mind, they overcome egocentrism. In other words, they learn that other people have their own motives, wants, and wishes. For example, alam mo that other people kaya may isda for example sa lamesa kahit hindi ka kumakain ng isda. It's not because pipilitin ka kumain ng isda. Maybe because mahilig yung kapatid mo sa isda or mahilig yung nanay mo sa isda. Ayan. Okay? Or kapag tinatago mo na yung remote sa kapatid mo kasi natatakot ka ilipat, you realize that other people have their own wishes. Okay? Yung mga younger, nag struggle pa with theory of mind, but around 4, nag start na siya ma-develop. We understand that may sariling pag-iisip ang ibang tao. And what we think is not necessarily the same as what's going on sa isip nila kasi may sarili silang pag-iisip. Okay, that's something we develop around 4, mas nagba-mature pa siya around 5. Okay? Yung mga individuals with autism, usually they struggle with theory of mind. Isa yan sa mga difficulties nila, understanding the wishes and desires of other people. Okay, more about cognitive developments. So in this stage, talking about memory, no? Like what you remember from Introduction to Psychology. No? Well, in this stage, well, marami tayong mga childhood memories, di ba? Okay, if you remember from Intro Psych, no, maraming categories, maraming types of memories. This time, let's focus on episodic. On the episodic memory in childhood, let me highlight, okay, generic memory and autobiographical memory. Okay? When we say generic memory during childhood, this is something that is based on a script or produces a script. For example, in generic memory, you know that every day you go to school, you take a bath, okay? That sasakay kayo, for example, ng tricycle, going to school, no? Mga everyday things no, na hindi naman masyadong personally significant. Like the time that you went to McDonald's, but that's something that you do maybe weekly or on a bi-weekly basis. So it's generic, no? It doesn't really have that much of a personal significance. But when we say autobiographical memories, these are memories, okay, that has personal significance to you. Na madalas, nag-emerge daw siya between 3 and 4 years of age. Kumbaga sa inside out, ito yung tinatawag natin ng mga core memories. No? So right now, think of it, no? Ano ba yung mga important core memories ninyo? No? What are your first memories that you can recall up until today, no? That are personally significant to you? Okay, and how do we form memories? No, according to one perspective, according to the social interaction model, which is based on Vygotsky's sociocultural theory, kaya daw tayo nakaka-form ng mga autobiographical memories, no? O yung mga memories that are personally significant to us. It's because it's a collaborative process daw with adults. Kumbaga, ikikwento sa atin ng mga magulang natin, tayo naman mare-recall natin. And yung collaboration na yun between the kwento of the parent and your own experience plays a role in your recall of that specific event in your life. For example, kapag kinikwentuhan ka ng magulang mo na nung bata ka, naalala mo, ginawa mo to, no? Yung first day mo sa school, and then you also remember it. That plays a role, no? In the, nung kung bakit tumatatak sa isip mo yung memory na yon, kung bakit siya nagkakaroon ng personal significance sa iyo. Okay? Moving forward with our discussion, other cognitive advances would be, syempre, merong mga development sa ating language, sa pagsasalita natin, di ba? Sa paggamit natin ng wika. And in this stage, maybe na-notice nyo ito sa mga bata sa bahay ninyo, no? If you're living with children or a child no, in your house, okay, meron time na ang dami nilang words na nalalaman. And that's what we call fast mapping. No? Yung fast mapping, marinig lang nila yung word, alam na nila yung ibig sabihin. And that usually happens no, in early childhood. For example, no, marinig lang nila sa YouTube, gagayahin nila, gagamitin na nila in a context. di ba? Ang gamitin na nila in a specific context. For example, they understand yung mga words na usually adults na yung nakakaintindi. No? Yung mga objects, yung mga words, no, gagamitin nila, nagigets na nila. At magugulat tayo na alam na nila kung ano yung meaning nun. Okay? Yan yung like naiintindihan nila what is a cell phone, what is a charger, what is a laptop, okay? And so on, no? Madalas may role din diyan yung paggamit nila ng technology, particularly sa YouTube, no? Lalo na nanonood ng um, mga foreign shows, so doon sila natututo ng mga words na foreign as well. Gumagaling din sila in terms of paggamit ng English language. Well, hindi naman yan totally masama, no? Pero syempre in moderation, under dapat siya sa supervision ng magulang. Okay? So look at this. According to research, by age 6, a child has an expressive vocabulary of 2,600 words, no? So kaya na niya mag-speak up to 2,600 words, pero in terms of understanding, up to 20,000. Kasi whenever we talk about language, ahead palagi yung understanding kaysa kay speaking. Okay? For example, tayo sa English, we know a lot of English words, phrases, sentences, pero in terms of speaking, we're not that confident. Parang second lang siya to understanding. Ganun naman sa lahat, even sa mga bata. They know a lot of words, okay? Pero, no, yung kanilang expressive vocabulary around 2,600 words pa lang. But that is something expected to grow, especially because of fast mapping. Okay? Other improvements sa language use, they learn how to use plurals, possessives like mine, yours, ours, okay? Bahay natin, bahay nila, okay? Yung laruan niya, laruan ko, and so on. They learn how to use past tense, although not yet perfect, and they know the difference between I, you, and we. Diba? Yan yung mga natututunan natin back in elementary. Okay? Tapos, they learn how to use declarative, like yung declarative sentence, yung something that ends with a period, it's a declaration. They also learn how to use interrogative sentences or questions. Yeah, I remember this is something that I developed back in grade 1, no, knowing the difference between declarative, interrogative, and finally imperative, a sentence na pautos, no, giving a command. Yan. And by ages 5 to 7, parang adult na daw magsalita ang isang bata, no? So, isa rin yan sa mga na-observe ko, no? And bakit, no? Kung titingnan natin in terms of speech, okay, meron tayong tinatawag na pragmatics. And when we say pragmatics, okay, yan yung ability to use language in a specific context. Yung tandaan yung word, yung context. Okay? When we say pragmatics, alam niyo yung sarcasm. Kapag sinabihan ka na ang pogi mo or ang ganda mo, it's not always it's not always a compliment. It can be sarcastic. The same goes for tagalan mo pa or bagalan mo pa. Okay? Children learn how to, learn more about pragmatics dito sa stage na ito. They learn that merong iba't ibang konteksto and that in the different context, pwedeng iba yung meaning ng word or ng sentence. They also engage in what we call social speech. This is a type of speech that is meant to be understood by listeners. Ayan, marunong na sila how to tell a story and how to tell a joke. That's something na na-observe ko sa mga bata in this stage, no, which shows their improvement in terms of language use. At aside from that, they also engage in private speech. Yung they talk aloud to oneself, no, without no intent to communicate to others. No, I remember as a kid I do this a lot. No, parang nagsasalita ako na hindi ko naman, that is not meant to share, no, but more of parang kunyari I'm narrating what's happening dun sa nilalaro ko. I'm talking, for example, to my toys. No, well, normal lang naman yan sa development. No, lahat tayo dumaan sa ganyang phase. Okay, for now, this is where we end our discussion about early childhood. We will continue this next time, okay, for the second part of our discussion about early childhood. Thank you very much for listening. I'll see you in the next video. Bye, everyone.